I'm not sure what odds you would have gotten that prior to free agency, the Canucks would now be without Markstrom, Toffoli, Tanev, Stetcher, and still have Jake Virtanen. Yet here we are. Iain, Sat, of those three UFAs and Stetcher, which one seems like the one that got away?
Well, whatever the odds were, first of all, I wish I'd laid a bet because it wasn't very likely, but it was always possible. It feels like Tyler Toffoli is the one who got away because he's the one who hasn't been replaced, and there really isn't money to replace him. You know, Braden Holtby, I think, was a really good plan B when they couldn't get Jacob Markstrom, and then they made the trade for Nate Schmidt, who is an upgrade on Chris Tanev, but because they were hoping for this Nate Schmidt trade and leaving money for him in the salary cap, there was nothing to spend on Toffoli or spend on a comparable. So right now, that's the position from last year that they're down.
Well, clearly the best player they've lost is Toffoli, where they have not replaced him yet. Ian's absolutely right. But the player that got away because they could have fit him in, to me, is Troy Stetcher. And the biggest disappointment with Stetcher, he is replaceable. Third-pairing defenseman, you can find guys like that. But for the rate they had him, the age he has, being a Vancouver Canuck for his entire pro career, had they communicated better with him, they may have perhaps been able to get him signed to a good deal. And if you have Schmidt on your second pair, you have Troy Stetcher back on your third pair, all of a sudden your defense is set. So yes, Toffoli's a big guy they lost, they haven't replaced. The one that got away to me is Troy Stetcher.
Let's go back to the goaltending then for a second, and I'll start with you, Sat. With Holtby in and Markstrom gone, I think it's impossible to say the goaltending got better. But is it that much worse?
The hope is it's not significantly worse. Now, you can bank on Ian Clark. We've talked about Ian Clark and how he gets the best out of the goalies he works with. He does have a relationship with Braden Holtby. And Holtby himself used to work with Mitch Korn with the Capitals, who had left the organization, joined the New York Islanders. And when he worked with Korn, he was one of the best goalies in the league. The last couple of years, Holtby hasn't been at the same level. He understands the importance of working with a goalie coach that gets the best out of him. Maybe we can't see Holtby be as good as Markstrom was last year because he was legitimately a Vezina candidate. But if he gives you 90% of Markstrom working with Ian Clark, then maybe you're not missing as much.
I think the big wild card in the goaltending discussion is probably Thatcher Demko, because people forget that he's only had one full season in the NHL. And, you know, at his age and at his level of experience, he should still be getting better organically. And I think he will with Ian Clark. It would be foolish to argue that there hasn't been a downgrade in the short term, because Markstrom was so good the last 2 years. But it's close. Holtby and Demko could be a really good combination, and I think by the end of a season after working with Ian Clark, they're going to be a better duo than they are at the start.
Well, if you talk now about the forwards, we mentioned they have not replaced Tyler Toffoli, so the forward group is not as good. But defense, top four, better now, Ian?
Well, I think Nate Schmidt is a difference maker. I think if anything, he's been underrated for what he's done in Vegas, because, you know, Shea Theodore came along and developed into such a dynamic, great young defenseman. But Nate Schmidt, you know, has impact at both ends of the rink. He's a tremendous skater. I think the top four is better because I think Nate Schmidt is a little better than Chris Tanev, and we all love Chris Tanev. But I think Nate Schmidt can do a little more. Certainly skates better, which bodes well for the future. I think he's going to provide the Canucks a big lift.
So I'll leave you with this, and you still need to complete the defense a little bit. You need to add something for the third pair. Do you think that's the last piece that Jim Benning is looking for right now, considering the cap constraints?
The more realistic one, yes, is trying to find one more defenseman to fill out that, especially that third pair role, Dan. And I know the Canucks would love to add a top six forward. A lot easier said than done. And if you're looking at adding anybody in addition to, say, an Oscar Fantenberg, you're talking about maybe less than $1 million. Anything above that or a top six forward, the Canucks are going to have to find a way to move cash out, which is an incredibly hard task in today's pandemic and the economy for the National Hockey League. I do expect the Canucks to add a defenseman. They'll try for a top six forward, but do they have the cash? Can they find a way to do that?
I'll leave the final question to you then, IMAC. Do you see a buyout being a possibility for Jim Benning?
I think it is. I think it depends on what the arbitration settlement, if it goes that far, with Jake Virtanen is, and how much it's going to cost to have Jake in the bottom six next season. He'll get a chance to play in the top six. So I think it's definitely a possibility, but they obviously considered it in the last buyout window, and they didn't they didn't act. And also you have to remember ownership plays a role in this as well. And the team would need a green light to buy out a guy at a time when the NHL is in their biggest economic downturn, probably in its history as a percentage. And the other thing about looking at buyouts, we all know that the Canucks have Hughes and Pettersson coming up. They're doing their best, I think, to keep their balance sheet as open as possible and not have any obligations beyond the season that they don't have to have. And of course, if you buy somebody out, you're going to be carrying a charge at least for next year.
So the Canucks have picked up a goaltender, have traded for a defenseman, but still plenty of work to be done for Canucks GM Jim Benning.